Welcome back to the Mercy Cast, where we are learning the art of compassion through the adversity of life. I am your host, Raleigh Sadler. Whether you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just the myriad of different podcast hosts out there, like this, subscribe to it so that it keeps coming in every Wednesday morning. We want more people to understand that there is mercy for them. And with that said, today I want to talk about how we're wired. Every one of us is different. Every one of us has a different story. Every one of us interacts with the world in our own unique way. Some of us are extroverts. Some of us are introverts. Some of us are ambiverts. For me, I'm a social introvert. That means a lot of people think I'm an extrovert. They think I can go into a room, command a crowd, and I can for like 30 minutes. And then I want to hide in a closet. I want to go into the bathroom. And honestly, sometimes I make that excuse. I'm like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. They're like, what did he eat? Is he okay? No, I just want to be away from people because I need just a couple of moments to recharge and get back in the game. I have friends who aren't like that. I have friends who are thriving when they talk to people. That's wonderful too. But sometimes we can think that there's something wrong with us when we compare ourselves with other people. Mike spent his whole life feeling ineffective because he wasn't as outgoing as God wanted him to be. Then he discovered that his temperament was actually God's unique design, and this fact changed everything. Today, I get the pleasure of talking to Mike Bechtle, the author of the new book, How to Read a Room. Mike, welcome to the Mercy Cast.
Thank you very much. Great intro.
Thank you. We talked a little bit before we started recording about how we're wired. For me, I didn't know I was a social introvert. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm tired. What's wrong with me? Why am I dragging? I think that happens to us. We compare ourselves. We think that there's got to be something wrong with us. We can't rest in the fact that we are unique and that is okay. What happened when you made that connection that your temperament was by divine design?
Well, I think I realized that years ago when I grew up and heard sermons about evangelism and how you're supposed to go out there and be bold and noisy and be loud. And the more uncomfortable it was, the more real it was. God was pleased with you if you did and upset if you didn't. And I always operated from guilt on that.
Yes.
I would go out and figure out a way to do evangelism, which means if I could talk to one person, it's like, okay, I did it. God's happy with me. And I think it was like a smoker that you have a cigarette, you feel better, and then you go for a while, and then all of a sudden you need another one. It's like it would last me a while, and I could even bring it up in conversation. A couple of weeks ago, when I was sharing my faith with so-and-so, but it was so unnatural to me, I thought, if God wants me to do it that way, why didn't he make me noisier? I used to think that all the people who taught you how to share your faith were like eagles, and I was a turtle. They were telling me how to fly, how to get around. And I thought, God didn't make me that way. He made me a turtle. So maybe there's a way to do this in a turtle way that's just as effective. And I learned some pretty amazing things in scripture and just through life, trying to figure it out, just like you said. How do you negotiate this life thing with the temperament God created you to have, which means he wants to use you through that?
Well, and a lot of these evangelism training strategies seem to be written by extroverted people. It presupposes that you feel very comfortable just walking up and talking to people, or that you should. I know for me, when I walk up to someone I don't know, every time it's a conscious decision. I feel like I'm jumping out of a plane, which I don't ever want to do. But I feel like I'm like coming up to the edge and saying, this could go sideways. This could get weird. This is going to cost emotional energy. But I want to be here, so I'm going to just say some words and see if that person reciprocates. And that's really my social strategy. I don't know about you.
Oh, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah, same thing.
So you're like, I want to talk to these people, because you're probably at a point in your life where you feel free to not do it if you don't have to. Every time I get my hair cut, I felt like I needed to share the gospel with the person cutting my hair. And the poor person, because I would always stumble into it and I'm like, okay, God loves me because I shared the gospel. Then I get a little older, I start understanding the gospel better, and I realize I'm loved either way.
Yeah.
So I get to just be me. And so for you, like, what has that journey looked like when you just kind of stepped into your own skin and said, I'm just going to take this slow and easy. I'm going to be me.
I think the transition came when I realized that being a turtle was not second string. It's like, yeah, the extroverts are really the ones God uses, but the introverts, I'm just not there. So God will be happy with me and I can do some stuff, but not like that. I can tell you a story where some of the transition took place. I was in grad school and I was working for a Christian Sunday school publisher. Now, this was back when every student had a Sunday school book for the quarter, and it was like a lesson plan that they would take home and fill out. And then the teacher had a leader's guide, and it was dated. So it was just written curriculum. So if a church bought that curriculum, all the churches in the country that were using that curriculum were getting the same lesson on the same day. So I was writing those lessons. And once a quarter, they wanted to do a gospel presentation where the teacher of the class would share the gospel. And I would give them the words and the encouragement and give them everything they need to do it in that setting. And it was a dated curriculum, so I could tell which day my lessons were coming out. This curriculum was in about 50,000 churches around the country. The average Sunday school class was probably, and this is high school, about 10 students. Some obviously had more, some had less, but about 10 average. One Sunday morning, I thought, today's the day my lesson's going out there. I did the math. And I thought, okay, 50,000 students are going to be hearing the gospel today because I took time at my desk to come up with something to equip the teachers of this curriculum. And I thought, okay, that's 500,000 people are going to hear the gospel today. And let's say that 0.1% came to Christ. I think it was like 500 or 5,000, something like that would come to Christ that day. So I thought, okay, I'm an introvert and I'm not going door to door, but because of using my giftedness and my skill, probably at least 500 or more people came to Christ that morning. But that doesn't feel as real as going and doing something on the beach where you walk up to somebody and embarrass them. So that was a turning point for me when I realized God uses us. He created us the way he did so he could use us the way he created us.
And you've got me thinking, so many of us think that we share the gospel solely through personality. Like it's our own gregarious nature that we can leverage to interact with other people for the kingdom of God. But what you're saying is personality is a small part, but at the end of the day, we engage our neighbor through our vocation. And this is something Lutherans have been saying since Martin Luther came on the scene. They've been realizing that you love your neighbor through your work for your neighbor. And it's cool because at that point, it's not about how funny you are or how clever you are or how many jokes you can tell that keep the crowd in tune with you. You can just do the thing that you do and trust that it will impact people. Whether you dig ditches, whether you write, whether you are a speaker or a motivational speaker, you can just do the thing. And I love that about kind of what you're saying. How have you seen that play out as you've leaned into that vocation?
It took it out of the project category, that you are no longer a project and my goal in life is to win you over to Christ. You're a person that I just need to have a relationship with. And God will work within that, because what the verse said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. Yeah. So it's like, my job is just to love people and talk. And he's the one that uses those relationships to do what he wants to do. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people in that person's life. God uses me maybe to take them from where they are at point H to point I, and then somebody else will come along, take them from I to J. But I was always taught that it's my job to close the sale at the end and give them the steak knives and everything that goes with it. So
I think when I was in seminary, I always wanted to be the most gifted person in a room. And the hard realization was that oftentimes I wasn't. That didn't mean I wasn't gifted. But I think for me, especially as someone who was nurturing unchecked perfectionism at that point, I I needed to be the one who had it all together. At this stage of my life, I'm more like, I do what I do and I know what I know. I have had people who were intense extroverts speak into my life. I've had people who were intense introverts speak into my life. And like you said, at different phases, they kind of come in and you get what you need. And I think everything is kind of like a linear thing when we're dynamic people and the people we're interacting with are dynamic. And yeah, that seems to hold true. This idea of just being ourselves and trusting that God amplifies that.
Well, if I see you as someone that every time we have a conversation, you're trying to win me over, I don't trust you. It's like
Yeah.
you are trying to sell me something or take me
Yes.
someplace. It's so freeing to not have to always have an agenda. Just love people, care about people, get curious about people, and have real relationships and speak into their lives about life. And there will come times when they might have questions. I think I've gotten over the need to talk to strangers about Christ because I haven't learned the right to do that yet. Now, maybe that's just my perspective as an introvert, but I know what it feels like when people try to approach me or do something. So,
Yeah, I've got to this point where I kind of just sit there. If I'm in a coffee shop, I'm just sitting there. And if someone strikes up a conversation with me, I will take the next step in that conversation. If they say another couple of words, I will say something else. But I've always been really sensitive to the fact that I don't want to be the one who keeps talking when someone else is trying to get out of the conversation.
yeah.
And so, how do you read that? Because I think that is a fear that a lot of people face. They don't want to be that person who's so emotionally unintelligent in the moment that they miss the fact that this person really doesn't want to talk to you. They just want to move to the next person in the room.
Well, and that's the problem we run into. That's why I wrote this last book, How to Read a Room, because so many people go in with the idea of, okay, what are people thinking about me? How do they look at me? What kind of an impression am I making? And then I finally realized people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves and how they're coming across, but they're all pretending to be outgoing and loving every minute of it. And I think that's why the first step that we tend to ignore the most in reading any kind of a situation is not to talk, but to observe. And there's certain things to observe. I stand back, look at the big picture and see what the dynamics are. I try to avoid conversations until I get a sense of what's happening. And it's amazing what that does for you. Now I'm looking at other people to see what they're doing, figure out what they're thinking, what's going on. And it keeps it from being about me anymore. Because the idea of reading a room, there are lots of books on how to do that. An introvert can easily learn to be comfortable in any situation. But then what? It's like, okay, so I'm comfortable. It almost felt a little narcissistic to me that if reason I read this book is so I can be comfortable. Well, yeah, but what do you do with it now that you're comfortable? Maybe I can make an impact in that room. I can help people or change people, help them to be better just by genuine caring.
We all know what it's like when we misread a social situation. I was recently in another country. I heard someone speaking English. It had been a little while since I'd heard someone speaking my native tongue. And I made a joke, just kind of walked up and spoke in English. What I didn't know was I had been traveling for a little bit at that point, and they had just traveled over there. So for them, hearing another person speak English wasn't that big of a deal. But it was super awkward because they did not want to talk to me at all. And I walked off, and it was almost embarrassing too. I was like, ooh, I whiffed on that. But then I go, and it's wintertime, and I'm sitting under a little hut, and there's all these people speaking a language that I don't know. And I see these other two people talking, and I'm like, why am I doing this? And I walk up to them and talk to them. And I said, hey, I have a question. Can you answer this? And they looked at me and they're like, we noticed you earlier. We heard you earlier. We spent the next 3 hours talking. They gave me tons of advice. They basically adopted me. It was incredible. But it took that courage to have the conversation after I whipped the first one. Do you think you learn to read a room by making mistakes?
Yes. Well, I think we learn everything in life by making mistakes. Almost everything. Because I still remember one time when my daughter was a teenager and she was going through whatever she was going through. And I was trying to help her understand just some life lesson or whatever. And she said, "But Daddy, I want to make my own mistakes."
Wow.
And I thought, well, why? I said, well, I did the same thing. But I look back, everything I know now is probably because of all the things that I did and they didn't work. John Maxwell talks about failing fast. Like failure is not a bad thing. You learn from it and now you're at a different place.
I've been contemplating this idea of failing forward, of messing up and then trusting that mess up actually may lead me to the next thing. And that there's even grace in the mess ups where it's just like, ooh, man, did I really do that? Or did I really say that? Whatever that mistake is. And then just trusting, okay, it got me to where I am, whether I expected to be here or not. And I found that a lot of the people that I've met in times where maybe I shouldn't have met them, maybe I went down one way that I didn't expect, and all of a sudden I connected with people. Those people tend to be some of my best friends. They're always the unexpected people. They're not the people I look for, but they're the people that find me.
Mm-hmm. Somebody told me the other day, you can't make new old friends. And I thought about that for a long time. And I thought, it's true. It's at a certain point, you can't. I'm at an age right now where somebody asked us, would you ever move to a new house or a new state or something? I thought, you know what? I don't think so, because we'd have to start over. The friends that we have, we've gone through life with, done rough stuff with, had those conversations, and there's history. But if I move someplace new and you have to start all over again, I'm not sure I want to go through all that effort and starting from scratch.
Yeah. I've kind of lived around the Eastern Seaboard over the last 25 years. I've moved around a good bit. I promise I'm not on the run, but I've lived in all these places. And recently I started feeling the need to get rooted again. I had spent 7 years in New York City, but then left right before the pandemic. During the pandemic, I was in Chicago for 2 years and moved to another place in Florida. I was trying to find my place. I was traveling, praying, and doing some pilgrimages, and then felt led to come back basically to my hometown and be with my family. And what I noticed was my roots were here. I have friends that I've been friends with for 35 years. And these are people who have seen every phase of Raleigh Sadler. They have seen victories. They have been with me in defeat.
Yeah.
When other people would walk away, these people have walked to me. And I'll tell you, it is a game changer having those people. It's not a ton of people, but it's some very key people that I can trust no matter what.
Yeah.
If they're even listening to this podcast, they know exactly who they are. For me, having those relationships help me to start new ones, because I know now that I'm dealing with house money, I have good, solid community now. And now I'm free to just say, I'm going to start this conversation. And if I become friends with this person, great. And I'm also free to not rush a relationship. I can just be like, hey, this is a great person to talk to. Wonderful. Because I don't need it. You know, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. I think God probably is much more interested in us caring about people and having those kind of relationships than having a structure of here's the things you need to do to make me happy. He puts us with people. He gives us opportunities. Some of them will turn into friendships. Some of them won't. But he's put us here with our life experience to connect with other people. You find that common ground, that overlap, and then you start sniffing around the edges. And usually that's how relationships grow, is from the common ground first and see what happens.
So we were talking earlier about, say we're in a party environment. We're listening, we're watching, and we're just trying to pay attention to what's happening. most people, not everyone, but I'll look for people kind of like me, and then I'll start a conversation. Is there a reason that we do that? Or do
Probably
we all do
because,
that? I don't know.
no, I think we do because they're safe. We make assumptions when we see somebody, and it's like there's something about them that makes it feel like we might be on the same page. I can talk to them and it would be safe. And for me, that's going to be probably somebody who's back in the corner, maybe on their phone because they're uncomfortable with what's going on. If my success in that room is based on how many people I talk to, it's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. It's like a networking event, which is a product of the devil himself.
That's
But
right.
but if I'm trying to make a difference in the room, if I talk to one person and encourage them, is that worth my time there? Or if I talk to two people, I think that's where we can make the impact. Introverts are wired for individual relationships and the depth of relationships. Extroverts tend to think faster. I think of the perfect response to somebody about 10 minutes after they walked away, and I have to process longer. Whereas an extrovert thinks faster, but introverts tend to think deeper. And so you can take a conversation to a deeper level, and both people walk away encouraged and in a better spot because you did that. That's a mission in any kind of an event is who can I hang out with? And both of us came out stronger because of that.
You mentioned this idea of assumptions and the role they play on us reading a room and connecting with other people. Could you tell me more about that?
When I see you for the first time, if you look like somebody that I know, I'm going to assume you're just like them. I met somebody the other day. My doctor has been my physician for probably 30 years. And he's one of the most caring people, not just as a doctor, just a caring person. He deeply cares about the people he's involved with. I met somebody who could have been his doppelganger, his look-alike. Everything about him looked just like him. I ended up in a conversation with him. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to talk to my doctor. And he was the grumpiest guy I'd ever run into. He didn't care. And I had to realize that first impressions aren't necessarily bad. They keep us safe. It's almost like in education or research, you come up with a hypothesis. Say, here's what I think is true about this subject. And now I'm going to test it. It probably won't come out the way you said it, but that doesn't mean you failed. It means you had a baseline. You start with a hypothesis and then you test it to see if it's accurate. And then you tweak your hypothesis over time based on what you learn. Same with a person. I'm assuming that you're somebody that I want to talk to. When I come up to you and start a conversation, now I'm testing it. And I probably will just start exploring. Introverts, I don't have to impress you. I just want to find out your story. And people are starved to be listened to. We go into situations and everybody feels like I have to have things to talk about. And they talk about themselves. When you've talked to somebody and they do all of the listening and you do all the talking, you go home and you tell your wife what a great conversations they were. They just listened, but they gave you what you needed. They connected.
Yeah. And I think the inverse is true that sometimes we'll look at somebody and they will remind us of someone who's hurt us in the past. And we will put that on them. We will say, no, that this is how they are. And it could be their body type, the way that they smile, the way they wear their hair, so many superficial things. And then we count them off. Sometimes we're not even self-aware that we do that. I just don't have a good feeling about that person. You don't have any objective knowledge of this person, but you are speaking out of your own relational fear or trauma or pain.
Yeah.
And not actually being present in a moment to be able to say, well, let's see. And I think that's where freedom comes in. That's where healing comes in. It's all right, I don't know. Let's see. You don't know till you know, right?
Yeah. And I understand that because if somebody has hurt me and now you remind me of that person, depending on how much they hurt me, I'm going to protect myself. That's not necessarily a bad thing. but at least to say whatever I do in this conversation, or even just to be in a relationship in a group or whatever, to say, I'm going to test this hypothesis. I'm going to just give it a chance and see what they're actually like. If you've been hurt, it's going to be refreshing to find out what they're really like.
One thing I've noticed in traveling around Europe, something that'll happen is these people will pull me aside and they're always either Austrian or German. They'll be like, you know who you look like? And at first they think I'm actually this guy. There's a German rapper named Cito. And I have had more people think that I'm Cito. I could be eating in a McDonald's and people will be like, when's your birthday? They thought I was lying about being Cito. We kind of do look alike. It's very funny. But I'm far from a rapper and I'm not German. People will treat you based on their familiarity with someone who reminds them of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to kind of know what we're bringing into the relationships.
That's really good. Yeah, because from your perspective, you know what it feels like when somebody does that to you.
Yeah. And I liked it. I felt like a movie star. I've never had a doppelganger. And so here I am with this guy and I'm like, he's actually doing well for himself. And these people, maybe I need to move to Munich or Vienna or something because I love the feeling of being stopped in a crowd. I'm like, thanks, guy. You really just gave my self-esteem a good jolt today. Like you guys.
And he's probably doing just the opposite because he wants to stop having all these people coming at him.
Exactly. He might hire me as a doppelganger just to separate him from a little bit of the fame. I'd be glad to. That'd be great.
There you go. A little side job.
A little side hustle, you know. So how would you encourage us? So say we're trying to figure out where to place our emotional energy. What are some concrete steps for us to do that?
I think the energy is an interesting part of it because when we're talking about introverts, extroverts, energy is usually the big differentiator. It's not whether you're shy or not. I've never been shy, but I've always been quiet. I can, I've taught over 3,000 seminars. So in front of a group, I'm very comfortable. National Speakers Association, there's supposed to be like 40% of the population is introverts. In National Speakers Association, the professional speakers, it's around 70%. When you're in front of a room, you're in control. You know what's happening. If I'm sitting in the room and you call me up on the stage, I'm going to panic.
Right.
And it's like, so where does your energy come from? Someone said it's like extroverts are like solar panels where they have to be in a room and the more energy is going on, the more energized they are. An introvert is like a rechargeable battery. They work really well in that setting, but have to go in the dark for a while to recharge.
Yeah.
My son-in-law is an extrovert, big Star Wars fan. When the new movies would come out, he would dress up like R2-D2 and go to Hollywood and go to the red carpet just to be there. And he loves going to a theater the first showing of the movie. He feels cheated because he wants the energy of the whole room. My wife and I will go to a theater, and a couple of times we've actually gotten there, maybe at the end of the movie's run or something, and we're the only two people in the theater. And we're thinking, this is heaven. And one person walks in and we go, a crowd. And so being able to explore those kind of things, say, where would I go with it? Is to recognize that God has created us with the temperament, the personality that we have. I have to be careful where I spend my energy because I will be spending it. I need that to be able to pull back and recharge and not feel guilty because I'm not constantly doing things. In a room, if I go into a conference room or even if I'm in a series of meetings, then if somebody wants to talk to me, I have to have the freedom to be able to say, we'll talk tomorrow morning or whatever. I just can't do it.
Well, it's funny that you say that because as you were talking, I was thinking, I want to ask him about how do we keep those boundaries? Because if all of us have had that moment where we knew there was something in us saying, you don't have the energy for this.
Yeah.
But we did it anyway. Maybe we had a little bit of an edge in the conversation, or maybe we just knew that we should press pause and return when we were more recharged. But sometimes we think we can handle everything when the best thing we can do is just say, let's get back to that tomorrow. How do we grow in those boundaries relationally?
I think keeping them simple. because we tend to overcomplicate it. Well, what are they going to think? How do I do this? Can I give them a little bit of my time? If I know my limitations, and if I am out of fuel, it doesn't matter if I'm a Volkswagen or a Lamborghini, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
If I am either one, and it's like, if I'm out of gas, then, and you want something or you need something, I will say, I would love to talk to you. I can't do it right now, but let's schedule something else. I just keep it real simple and direct. I found that 19 times out of 20, if you give them that other time, they're okay. It's like, because you didn't say no, I don't want to talk to you. You said, let's talk then. I actually learned that from, I don't know if you ever met Norm Wright. He wrote a bunch of books. He was one of my profs in seminary. I took a course one time on suicide intervention. And he said, if you're talking to somebody and they said, all right, I have my head in the oven and the gas is turned on, I need you to come see me. And it's like 2:00 in the morning. Then he said, in a very legitimate response is, turn off the gas. I'll be there at 8:00 tomorrow morning. I'll bring you some coffee or we'll go get coffee. And he said, you're breaking the cycle right there. He said, when they do that, there's a different motivation or whatever. But they're calling you for help. You've given them help by saying, yes, let's get together tomorrow morning at 8:30. I'm all yours. And that was so hard to learn, but people are okay. They usually are, they're getting what they need from you, but you put it on a different time frame. So it feels almost, you feel guilty doing it. But if there's nothing to give, there's nothing to give.
Yeah. And I think being self-aware enough to say, this is what I can do. Here are my boundaries. If you are in mortal danger, call 911, or I can call 911. That is something that I would always counsel people to do. If someone is panicking and they're like, I need you, I will always ask, are you safe? Do you need me to call someone? Who would you need me to call? And what I've found, it's not, for me, it's always a genuine question when I ask that. But what happens is the answer is typically, no, I'm good. I just need someone to talk to. Okay. Let's talk in 2 hours. And I can devote the time to that. I think for the most part, when we're drowning, we can try to pull, and I think we've all been guilty of this, we can try to pull people into our mess. And some of us feel like we have to enter into that mess just like that. But I think if you read the situation and be like, okay, like, what really needs to happen here? This person's looking for someone to talk to. As I'm reading someone else, I need to be reading myself as well.
Yeah.
And just know what I have to contribute. Because if I go in there like I'm the hero, I'm going to mess up. I don't think God calls us to be heroes. I think he calls us to be neighbors. And there are different rules for neighbors than there are for heroes.
And family. There's different rules for if someone is family versus neighbor versus intimate family versus extended family. There's levels of where my priorities are for influence. I can't take on everybody, but I love the way you position that in terms of seeing what they need, if there's somebody else that can help, and the timing and everything else.
You know, you really bring up a good point. Sometimes we view all relationships as equal, and they're not. And so each relationship for me gets a different level of emotional energy. That does not mean I'm being dismissive, but say I am getting to know someone even romantically, I'm probably going to put more energy in that than I am with my local post office worker. Not to say that my local post office worker isn't doing great work, but I'm probably not going to put the level of attention and detail into that as I would as someone who could be a potential spouse. That's not to say that I couldn't marry a postal worker. I mean, they're great. But at the end of the day, every relationship is different. And I think for all of us, we just want to know how to do relationship well. And we want to do it in a way that actually serves our neighbor and makes us happy, makes us feel good, makes us feel comfortable. So, what are a couple of things that you would leave us with as we leave this conversation to think through how to read a room and how to connect with others?
Well, I think it all goes back to being intentional. I don't want to read a room just so I feel better. I can do that. It's a process you can learn, but then I want to be intentional. Now that I'm comfortable in that room, what is my role in this room? It's going to be different than yours, but what do I have to offer? What do I have to bring? If I can determine where my sweet spot is, we can call it spiritual gifts. But if I can be me in that room and go in there with the idea of serving, making people better in my conversations, I keep going back. I think it's Ephesians 4:29. It says, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only the words that are good for edification according to the need of the moment, which I won't know till I'm talking to them, that it can give grace to somebody. And the first part of that, I never understood. It says, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth. I thought, okay, so don't have bad thoughts about people and always think the right things. And it says, no, the thoughts are probably in there. You're feeling all this stuff. It's just, but don't let them out. Keep, like the lady down the street that has 12 cats, the UPS guy comes to the door. It's like, don't let the cats out. Keep the door. How do you keep those things in there? It's like, just be real with people, but have conversations with the mission of building them up. It says, no unwholesome word, only words that build up. So in casual conversations, to realize that we could say something that can make their day or break their day. We've all had people discourage us without even knowing it, and people that say one little thing and uplift us, and it's exactly what we needed. They have no clue.
I have some people in my life who I feel like they are masters of that. They know how to say certain things to where, and it could be the most simple thing. And, some of us are living for external validation. Some of us aren't. But regardless, if you're human, external validation can be nice. And when those people come alongside and they just say that thing like, hey, what a great thing you just said, or I like how you mow your lawn, and they might not even be thinking about like puffing you up. They might just be really interested. That stuff is wonderful. You're right. We don't have to say everything, but what can we say for the building up of our brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
And sometimes that will be the tough truth, but sometimes it might just be like, you might make the best popcorn this side of the Mississippi.
Because that can give them a lift in their day. It can pull them out of something that they're feeling or going through.
And I think that is why we have emotional energy, because like we said at the beginning of this podcast, we love our neighbor through vocation, through what we do. And we also love our neighbor through what we say. So much of this conversation has been about this idea of how do we read a room so that we can best care for the people in it. Mike, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. You guys do a great job with what you're doing, and I've listened to several of your most recent episodes, and you've got that as kind of a mission yourself. You're trying to help people be more compassionate in their relationships, and that's why we're here.